Jai Hare Krishna. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 9, text number 5. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Rayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudire nashtare shabadrishu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Sarvata deva pratipadhitam giram devim parigyatnirnaya tam bhakti vabhyagrinath asadvaram parishrutorushavasam garbhakshiti. Sarvata deva pratipadhitam giram devim parigyatam parandirnaya tam bhakti vabhyagrinath asadvaram parishrutorushavasam garbhakshiti. Okay, please. Sarve tadeva paripatitam giram devim parigyatam parandirnaya tam bhakti vabhyagrinath asadvaram parishrutorushavasam garbhakshiti. Sarvadeva pratipaditam giram devim parigyatam parandirnaya tam bhakti vabhyagrinath asadvaram parishrutorushavasam garbhakshiti. Can we try? Sarvadeva pratipaditam giram Devim Parikyata Paratmanirnaya Tam Bhakti Bhavapyakrinoda Sadhanam Parishutarushya Samradhashiti Dhruva Maharaj, by certainly, tada, at that time, eva, just, pratibadam, or pratipaditam, having attained, giram, speech, devim, transcendental, Parikyata, understood, Paratma, of the Supreme Soul, Nirnaya, the conclusion, come to the Lord, Bhakti Bhava, situated in devotional service, Abhyakrinima, offered prayers, asatvaram, without any hasty conclusion, parishruta, widely known, urushavasam, whose fame, Dhruva Dhruva, whose planet would not be annihilated. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. At that time, Dhruva Maharaj became perfectly aware of the Vedic conclusion and understood the absolute truth and his relationship with all living entities. In accordance with the line of devotional service to the Supreme Lord, whose fame is widespread, Dhruva, who in the future would receive a planet which would never be annihilated, even during the time of dissolution, offered his deliberate and conclusive prayers. Purport. There are many important items to be considered in this verse. First of all, the relationship between the absolute truth and the relative material and spiritual energies is here understood by a student who has complete knowledge of the Vedic literature. Dhruva Maharaj never went to any school or academic teacher to learn Vedic conclusion, but because of his devotional service to the Lord, as soon as the Lord appeared and touched his forehead with his conch shell, automatically the entire Vedic conclusion was revealed to him. That is the process of understanding Vedic literature. One cannot understand it simply by academic learning. The Vedas indicate that only to one who has unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord, as well as in the spiritual master, is the Vedic conclusion revealed. The example of Dhruva Maharaj is that he engaged himself in devotional service to the Lord according to the order of his spiritual master, Narada Muni. As a result of his rendering such devotional service with great determination and austerity, the personality of Godhead personally manifested himself before him. Dhruva was only a child. He wanted to offer nice prayers to the Lord, but because he lacked sufficient knowledge, he hesitated. But by the mercy of the Lord, as soon as the Lord's conch shell touched his forehead, he became completely aware of the Vedic conclusion. That conclusion is based on proper understanding of the difference between Jiva and Paramatma, the individual soul and the supersoul. The individual soul is forever a servant of the supersoul, and therefore his relationship with the supersoul is to offer that service, is to offer service. That is called Bhakti Yoga or Bhakti Bhav. Dhruva Maharaj offered his prayers to the Lord not in the way of impersonalist philosophers, but as a devotee. Therefore, it is clearly said here, Bhakti Bhav. The only prayers worth offering are those offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose reputation is spread far and wide. Dhruva Maharaj wanted to have the kingdom of his father, but his father refused even to allow him to get on his lap. In order to fulfill his desire, the Lord had already created a planet known as the pole star Dhruva Loka, which was never to be annihilated, even at the time of the dissolution of the universe. Dhruva Maharaj attained this perfection not by acting hastily, but by patiently executing the order of his spiritual master. And therefore he became so successful that he saw the Lord face to face. Now he was further enabled, by the causeless mercy of the Lord, to offer fitting prayers to the Lord, to glorify or offer prayers unto the Supreme. One needs the Lord's mercy. One cannot write to glorify the Lord unless one is endowed with his causeless mercy. Even spirits are all described within the next few verses. Let's go through the Purport of today's verse. There are many important items to be considered in this verse. First of all, the relationship between the absolute truth and the relative material and spiritual energies is here understood by a student who has complete knowledge of the Vedic literature. Shri Shri Radharani ki, Shri Prabhupada ki. Dhruva Maharaj never went to any school or academic teacher to learn the Vedic conclusion, but because of his devotional service to the Lord, as soon as the Lord appeared and touched his forehead with his conch shell, automatically the entire Vedic conclusion was revealed to him. That is the process of understanding Vedic literature. One cannot understand it simply by academic learning. The Vedas indicate that only to one who has unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord, as well as in the spiritual master, is the Vedic conclusion revealed. So as much as we can study and read about the Lord, it's explained that actually the Vedas can only be realized by a person who has unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord as well as in the spiritual master. And there are many examples of very exalted personalities who didn't even read and they were self-realized souls. We can think of Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj, the spiritual master Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He didn't read very much. Apparently he could read a little, but he didn't read at all. So he didn't study Vedic literature, but he was chanting all the time. He was a self-realized soul, and that's why Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur advised his son to be initiated by him, because he could understand what a great personality he was. And many people actually wanted to take shelter of him. And he actually refused many people, and he didn't want to accept many disciples. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur himself was a very learned devotee, very learned. And yet still he took shelter of Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj because he was a self-realized soul. He didn't read. And then there's another pastime where there was a brahmana who was asked to read the Bhagavad Gita. The spiritual master had instructed him to read, but he was illiterate, so he couldn't actually read. And then he would be looking at the cover of the Bhagavad Gita, the pictures, and thinking of how Krishna was the charioteer driver of his friend Arjuna. And he would actually cry, and the other devotees, they would mock him because he couldn't even read. But Lord Chaitanya came to this devotee and asked, why are you crying? You're not reading, so what is it that's touching your heart to making you cry like this? And then the devotee explains that it's because I'm just meditating all the time on how Krishna is the Supreme Lord and he becomes the chariot driver of his friend Arjuna, and that just melted his heart. So he was also a very advanced personality, and he couldn't even read either. So this process of learning academically, it's important for us. I mean, we should be reading. Prabhupada wants us to read his books, but that in itself won't give us the knowledge that will actually awaken our love for Krishna. What will give us that is unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord as well as in the spiritual master. Unless we have that, we won't actually get there. And faith is described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. A definition is given that faith is actually unflinching trust in something sublime. So if we had to place that definition into the sentence, it would say that unless we have unflinching trust in something which will be the Supreme Lord and Spiritual Master. The Vedic conclusion is so we really have an unflinching trust in the Supreme Lord and in our spiritual masters, really take shelter of them in order to understand what we're trying to learn here. Well, even the cowherd boys, they don't spend time reading all day, but they're playing with Krishna. And actually there are moments where we can catch glimpses of how they understand a little bit about who Krishna is, but they understand the most about who Krishna is because they have that love for him, they have that intimate mood for him, and then that knowledge about who he is just covered over by Yogamaya, the spiritual potency of the Lord, so that you can enjoy these pastimes with them. But all of that knowledge about who Krishna is, it's something that is within their hearts. They do know, because they love Krishna. Anything at any time can be revealed to them according to what he wanted them to know. And we know that there's that verse from Bhagavad Gita which is Tisham sataka yutanam bhajatam priti purvakam tadani udiyunantam yenam upayatite. To those who are constantly devoted to worshiping me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. And then Tesham yemanakam partam aham agyanatam jamtama nasayami navavasho yanadipena bhashvata. Out of compassion for them, I dwell in their hearts, destroy the shining lamp of knowledge, which is born with ignorance. So those two verses also explain that for us, aspiring to follow in the footsteps of the devotees, Krishna will actually help us to remember him. All that knowledge is coming from him when we're taking shelter in him, and when we're taking shelter in our spiritual masters. The example of Dhruva Maharaj is that he engaged himself in devotional service to the Lord according to the order of his spiritual master, Narada Muni. As a result of his remembering such devotional service with great determination and austerity, the personality of God had personally manifested himself before him. Dhruva was only a child. He wanted to offer nice praise to the Lord, but because he lacked sufficient knowledge, he hesitated. But by the mercy of the Lord, as soon as the Lord's concha touched his forehead, he became completely aware of the Vedic conclusion. So, because he had the desire to serve the Lord in a particular way, he was given everything he needed to do that service. Is that verse? Ananyashchintayantamam yajanadharipashate chishameja vivitanam yogashena vahamyaham. Those who worship me with the exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. That's Bhagavad Gita 9:22. So whatever we're lacking in our service to Krishna, if he would like us to do a particular service, or if we have a strong desire to serve the Lord in a particular way, he gives us everything we need to actually do that service. And sometimes that service can even be in the mind and be fulfilled, like that the Brahmana who he was living in poverty, he didn't have all the paraphernalia needed to worship the Lord. But every day he would go to meditation, he would cook something for the Lord, and then one day he was cooking sweet rice for the Lord. And he wanted to test if the pot was too hot. And then he actually burnt his finger in his meditation. And when he came out of the meditation, he saw that his finger was actually burnt. And then Lord Narayan was laughing and he said, let's go and fetch my devotee. So whatever we need to do our service is actually something we already have. Even not necessarily is there, we don't have anything at all. But Krishna, definitely we can see within our own lives as well. He was reciprocates with us, and what is needed for his service he will give. Whatever it may be, if he sees we're sincerely trying to serve, our mood is to just please him, then he will give us what is needed for our service to him. And in this case, Dhruva Maharaj wanted to glorify the Lord, and so the Lord is giving him that ability even though he's just a young boy. And what Dhruva has realized by receiving the mercy of the Lord and being touched with their conscience, that the conclusion, that the Vedic conclusion is based on proper understanding of the difference between the Jiva and Paramatma, the individual soul and the super soul. So we're the individual soul, the Jiva, and then there's the super soul, Paramatma, that is Kshira Prakashani Vishnu, seated within our hearts. So you can understand the difference between those two. And it says here, the individual soul is forever a servant of the super soul, and therefore his relationship with the super soul is to offer service. So this is an eternal relationship. It's one that doesn't change. We are eternally servants of the Supreme Lord. But actually, Ranga in the class the other day, she brought up a point that actually devotional service is actually greater than the Lord. So Krishna is so sweet that our eternal position is as his servant, but he allows his servant to seem even greater than himself, because his servant is so dear to him that he sees the service to him as being greater than his own self. That was spoken about in the Nectar of Devotion. It says that devotional service is even greater than God because it attracts God. Krishna is attracted by that. He's not attracted by anything else. That's what attracts him. And there are so many pastimes where we can see Krishna placing his devotee and devotional service even above himself. So let's consider a pastime with Tulsi Devi, who is also known as Bhakti Devi, because she bestowed devotional service to devotees. So Narada Muni, or transcendental space-time, who likes to cause some trouble and stir things up, he was traveling around and he went to Dwarka and he went to Queen Satyabhama and he said, "Did you know that Krishna loves Queen Rukmini more than he loves you?" And Queen Satyabhama, she became very upset by that, and she said, "Well, I'm wondering now, how can I become more dear to Krishna than anyone, more dear than Queen Rukmini?" And then Narada Muni thought about it and he said, "Well, if you can give me enough jewels that is equal to Krishna, then I will take the jewels and I will arrange something so that you can become most dear to Krishna." And so they took a scale, and on one side Krishna was, and on the other side they put all these jewels and gems. But Krishna obviously was heavier than the jewels and gems, so they put more and more and more, and they just really piled up the other side. And still Krishna was heavier. There was no amount of jewels and gems that they could find which was equal to Krishna, more than Krishna. And then Queen Rukmini had an idea. She said, "Let's take off all of those jewels, all of those gems, and let's just put one Tulsi leaf there, just one Tulsi leaf." So they did that, and immediately the scale turned. It's Tulsi Devi. Krishna was showing Tulsi is greater than me. She's far beyond me. Bhakti Devi, the person who bestows devotional service, they're more glorious. This is Krishna's mood. He's so sweet. And even when we were talking earlier about how he's a charioteer driver, even when he was driving a chariot, because we can understand that at that time a charioteer driver was seen as quite a lowly person. But he took that position because he wanted to serve his devotee. And we can even see, there are just so many examples. We can even see in the case of Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya came 500 years ago. He could have inundated our Godhead in every town and village and maintained that for the next thousands of years. He could have done it himself. But he brought Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada is doing that on his behalf. Therefore, Prabhupada is glorious. So Krishna gives Prabhupada the glory of being that personality who came and rescued all of us out of this ocean of material suffering. So Krishna is glorifying his devotees. So it's just that point that we are eternal servants of the Supreme Lord, and that position never changes. Yet being a servant is even more sweet than being Krishna himself. And there are some impersonalist philosophers or mind-wide philosophers who actually think that being God would be something greater, but they misunderstand, and perhaps they think that being a servant is not so wonderful, but it's more wonderful. It's even more wonderful than trying to be something that will never be anyway. And then, continuing with the purport, it says, that is called Bhakti Yoga or Bhakti Bhav. Dhruva Maharaj offered his prayers to the Lord not in the way of the impersonalist philosophers, but as a devotee. Therefore, it is clearly said here, Bhakti Bhav. The only prayers worth offering are those offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose reputation is spread far and wide. So, my Guru Maharaj explained to me that there are two different ways to pray. One is you can recite prayers of great personalities, and although we may not have the same intimate mood as those devotees when they were writing, praying, something rubs off into our consciousness. And then another way to pray is with our own words. But what we're reading is that all the prayers should be in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And there's a nice verse in the first canto, 5th chapter, the 10th verse. It says, those words which do not describe the glories of the Lord, who alone can sanctify the atmosphere of the whole universe, are considered by saintly persons to be like unto a place of pilgrimage for crows. Since for all perfect persons are the inhabitants of the transcendental abode, they do not derive any pleasure there. So those prayers and those words which are not in relation to the Supreme Lord, it's just like the place of pilgrimage for crows. It's a place that the Paramahamsas, the swan-like devotees, don't even want to go. And it's described quite nicely with an analogy where Srila Prabhupada speaks about how any poetry or any literature which is on subject matter that has nothing to do with the Supreme Lord is just like a decoration on a dead body. It's like decorating a dead body. So it's pointless. It's completely pointless. Any words that are not in relation to the Supreme Lord, and any prayers which are not in relation to Him as well. Dhruva Maharaj wanted to have the kingdom of his father, but his father refused even to allow him to get on his lap. In order to fulfill his desire, the Lord had already created a planet known as the pole star, Dhruva Loka, which was never to be annihilated, even at the time of the dissolution of the universe. So, usually at the end of Kali Yuga, the whole material cosmic manifestation will be annihilated. Vishnu will breathe in, and the whole of the universe will come and to reside within his body. But Dhruva Loka, which was created for Dhruva Maharaj, it's never annihilated. That's one place within the cosmic manifestation that remains intact, even though everything around perfection not by acting hastily, but by patiently executing the order of his spiritual master. And therefore he became so successful that he saw the Lord face to face. So there's two very important aspects just in that one sentence. One is that Dhruva Maharaj, he executed the order of the spiritual master patiently. He wasn't hasty about it. And that's also one of the instructions we get from Nectar Instructions, text number 3. Utsaha nishchayata yatta takama pravartana sammadhyaga satorite sadhevati prasijati. One can execute the process of bhakti yoga successfully with full-hearted enthusiasm, perseverance and determination by following the prescribed duties in the association of devotees and by engaging completely in activities of goodness. That was one translation Srila Prabhupada gave of the verse in purport. So patience, we need to be patient, and my spiritual master explains that patience is linked to tolerance. And we can see how tolerant Dhruva Maharaj is. It's not like it was just easy fasting for so many days and just living off of leaves and air. It's not like it would have been easy. Of course, he had to tolerate urges of the mind still. But because he was so focused and so determined, he did tolerate it. He was patient in his execution of his practice. So we also need to tolerate so much and be so patient. And then the second part is that he was executing the order of his spiritual master. And that's also important. It's so important. So yes, we have to tolerate so much, but we have to understand also what to tolerate. Like if we're tolerating something which is actually not favorable to our devotional service and to our service to our spiritual master and following all our guidelines, so probably we shouldn't tolerate it. We should actually try and do something to resolve that. But the other things which we cannot have any control over, there's so many things, we have to just tolerate them and really try to execute the order of our spiritual master wholeheartedly, make that our life and soul. Now he was further enabled by the causeless mercy of the Lord to offer fitting prayers to the Lord, to glorify or offer prayers unto the Supreme. One needs the Lord's mercy. One cannot write to glorify the Lord unless one is endowed with his causeless mercy. Whatever we can do, whatever it may be, it's all only due to mercy. We're really just products of mercy, and then, especially in the case of glorifying the Lord, we need a lot of mercy in order to do that, in order to properly glorify Him. I'm thinking of the example of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj, who's an associate of the Lord himself, Lord Chaitanya. He was instructed by Haridas Pandit to write the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but he felt himself very disqualified, and considering his age, it also seemed impossible because he was very shaky, he couldn't see very much, he couldn't hear very much, so he thought, how can I even try to write about the glories of the Lord in my condition? So he went in front of the deity, and he was asking for some sign. He was asking, should I actually undertake this service? Because it's such a big service and I'm not qualified. And then at the moment he was praying to the deity, the garland fell, and then the pujari picked up the garland and placed it around Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj's neck. So that was a clear indication that the deity gave him the blessings to continue to write, to glorify. And even in his condition, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj gave us the Chaitanya Charitamrita, because Krishna, he gave him that mercy. He wanted him to do that, so he got the mercy to be able to do Prabhupada would also say that in relation to his books, which are full of the glories of the Lord, that they're not my books, he would say. He would explain that Krishna is dictating to me what I should write. So that we can also see a case of Krishna giving more mercy for Srila Prabhupada to write and give this all to us. So that is there. And I was just thinking about how glorifying the Lord, it depends on mercy and not really on how much we know. Because that's what we're reading in the beginning as well, that we need the mercy of the Lord, we need the mercy of the spiritual master actually to be able to perform any service, to be able to glorify the Lord. And we could actually know everything about Krishna, I mean everything, without even knowing who Krishna himself actually is. We could know everything about Krishna and not even know who Krishna is, and not even know Krishna. It's really only someone who loves Krishna who is able to properly glorify him. And we can see that in the case of Srila Prabhupada, in the case of Srila Krishna's in the case of Madhyashoda. Madhyashoda's name means she who gives fame. She's giving fame to her little son Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because she loves him. So he's becoming famous as the little boy of Madhyashoda because she loves him in that way, in that mood. So she's able to properly glorify him the way he desires because she loves him. So, when someone actually loves Krishna, then Krishna gives the empowerment to that person to glorify him. And then that person also becomes glorious, like Srila Prabhupada. And it says here in the Harinam Chintamani that a sincere devotee, by the force of his purity, he cannot remain anonymous. So Srila Prabhupada and all of the devotees, our spiritual masters, because they love Krishna and they're engaged in glorifying the Lord Krishna, wants that his glories are spread. So Srila Prabhupada became well known all over the three worlds. We say Epidas Krishna Tribhuvana. He's well known even throughout the three worlds so that he can glorify the Supreme Lord. And I wanted to end with a really beautiful text from the Padyavali. It's one of my favorite texts. It's verse 72. Na Navayam Kavayo Natarkika Nacha Vedanta Nitanta Paraka Nachavadi Nivaraka Varam Kapatavira Kishara Kinkara. We are not poets, we are not magicians. We are not philosophers who have crossed to the further shore of Vedanta. We are not eloquent debaters. We are the servants of a rascal cowherd written by Sri Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. So again, we can know everything about Krishna without even knowing Krishna. But those devotees who love Krishna understand who Krishna really is without having to know that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when Srila Prabhupada said, even if Krishna is not God, we love him anyway. We know he is, but the point is, Madhyashoda doesn't know, and she loves him so much. That's all she needs to know. All she needs to know is that Krishna is her son. Okay. Are there any questions, comments, or corrections? Sachinanda is going to give us class. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada